In this week's parsha, Parshas Pincha, Parshas Balak, if you take a look, there's no mitzvahs listed. If you take a look at the minyan mitzvahs, there's no mitzvahs. However, as we'll see, there's a halacha that comes out from this week's parsha that's noigeya to all mitzvahs, most mitzvahs at least, that are totally in zman and time. We'll begin with the Haftorah in this week's parsha. The Haftorah, the pasuk says, "Ami zecharna ma yoetz Balak melech Moav." That's the connection in the Haftorah of this week's parsha. We've spoken about this a few times in the past. That the Haftorah, the takana of the Haftorah was in the time when we weren't able to read the Torah, so we read something in Navi, in Tanakh, that was connected to the parsha. The Levush goes through every single parsha with what is the Haftorah connected. In this week's parsha, that's what's connected. The pasuk says, the Navi says, that the Eibishter says, Zecharna, remember what happened, L'man das Tzidkos Hashem, to remember the Tzidkos Hashem, the Chesed, what the Eibishter did to us at the time, this story of this week's parsha. Which, by the way, very, very interesting, in the Siddur of the Chidah, he lists one of the Zechiras, right? These Sheish Zechiras that we have after davening. The Chidah actually has 10, a discussion for itself. The Bogad Avram brings the Arizal 6, the Chidah has 10. One of the additional on top of the 6 is to remember what happened, the story of this week's parsha, the Tzidkos Hashem, that the Eibusha saved Klal Yisrael. What exactly, of course we know the story, but what exactly was the Tzidkos Hashem that Klal Yisrael was saved? So the Gemara says, it's a Gemara in two places in Shas. The Gemara says in Brachos, Daf Zayin, as well as the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, the Gemara says, this I'll read the Lashon inside, the Gemara says, Ella, Malamed Shehoye Yedei Lachavan Oisa Shash HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kayos Ba. Bilam knew what time of the day the Eibishter is Kayos, and he was going to utilize that time to be Maklal Klal Yisrael. V'hainu the Amalu Noveli Yisrael, the Haftorah that we're going to read this Shabbos, Ami Zecharna Mayotz Balak Melech Moav V'goymer L'man Das Tzidkos Hashem. Why? Zok the Gemara Amr Reb Lazar Ilu Molei, that the Eibishter didn't refrain Kavayachol from being koyas in those days. Says the Gemara Lo Nishtayir Misaineim Shal Yisrael Chas V'Shalom, there would be no Klal Yisrael left if the Eibishter would have been koyas. So L'man Das Tzidkos Hashem, At Kedei Kach, that the Chidah counts it as from the Zechiris of every single day, to remember the Chesed Hashem that the Eibishter was in koyas in those days of this week's parsha of Bilam and Balak, and that's the Chesed Hashem. The Gemara says, how long is this time of Kas? How long is the Eibishter koyas every single day? The Gemara says, a rega. A rega. How long is a rega? Commemorate as long as it takes to say the word rega. A very short amount of time. Let's call it a second or two per day. So Tosfos asks, if it's such a short amount of time, what exactly was he going to be makalal? What was he going to curse Klal Yisrael in that short amount of time? Mamash, a second or two, such a short amount of time. What could have he accomplished already in that short time? Tosfos says two terutzim. Teretz number one, he could have said the word kalem, destroy them. Kalem, the word kalem, a short word, and that he would have tapped in to the time that the Rabbi Shalom is koyas, and he could have used that as a klala. Tosfos in Avodah Zarah adds on a few more words, and he says that the Eibishter Beroiv Chazdoi was mahapech from Kalem to what the Pasuk says weiter in the Parsha. The Pasuk says when Lamaisa he was mevorich, it switched from a klala to a bracha. So he said, Usruas melech boy. The Eibishter was mahapech from what was going to be said Kalem, switched it from Kalem to Melech, which it's switching around. Kalem is Chaf Lamed Mem, Melech is the other way around. Vayahapech, the Das Kainim on the Pasuk, he says api what it says in Kisavai. The Pasuk says, "Vayahapach Hashem elekecha l'chas haklala levracha." We as Vayahapach, where did the Eibishter change it around? He says over here, from Kalem to Melech, meaning to say, it's not just that the Eibishter wasn't koyes. That was one thing, the Eibishter wasn't koyes, but not only that, the Eibishter tapped him from this that he was Bilam was going to be a Bilam was going to be a klala. In that time, the Eibishter was mahapachet from klala to bracha to melech. Just to explain for a moment what's kalem and what's melech. So it's brought in many svarim. Kalem are the letters chaf lamed mem, kaved, the liver, leiv, the heart, mem, moyach. Melech is the opposite, it's moyach, leiv, kaved. What's the difference? A yid is supposed to function from his brain, his moyach, and that's supposed to dictate his heart. Halev chaimid, and then a person does the avera. A yid is supposed to go with his brain, and his brain is going to tell his heart what to do. So that's melech. Melech, the pshat, is a person, what's right is right, what's wrong is wrong. How do you define that? You define that not in emotions, what a person wants to do, but in his brain. So melech, of course, that's bracha. That's a way how to function in life, is through melech, through the brain, and the brain dictates what a person's heart should do. The opposite is kalem. If a person's heart dictates his brain that it's kalem, then it's a klala. By Matan Torah, it says vayichad sham Yisrael ki'ish echad b'leiv echad. The first thing is you need ki'ish echad. You need the person's the moyach, and then it's b'leiv echad. As opposed to in Bishalach, when the pasuk says v'hinei Mitzrayim noisei achreim, Rashi says b'leiv echad ki'ish echad, because over there the Mitzrayim, why did they go to fight the Yid, and how crazy were they to go out? They saw after the 10 Makkos. The Teretz is believe. Pari told them, opened up his oitzris, took out money, said you'll get the money from the Yid, and all the Medrashim. So it was believe echad ke'ish echad. They got on board because of the heart. So that's Tosfos' first Teretz, that the klala would have been kalem, one word to tap into that poshet, that rega, commemorate to tap in. And for that, the Eibishter Beroiv Chazdoi, the Tzidkos Hashem, refrained from that rega of kas. So maybe it wasn't shayach a klala. That's teretz number one. Tosfos' second teretz. Tosfos says that as long as the klala starts in the time of the zam, of the kas, that's enough. Meaning to say, it's true, the time of the zam is literally a second. If you would have started in that second, then he could continue on and on, as much klala as necessary, but as long as you start. That's the second teretz. Two terutzim in Tosfos. One teretz is the word kalem is enough. Another teretz is a long klala, but as long as you start in the time of on the time of Zam. So technically, if you stop right here, it's drush, it's a chumash here, avad it's negated this week's parsha. What is it? Is it negay la'alacha? The Magen Avram on the din of the Shulchan Aruch and Siman Kuf Yud, the Shulchan Aruch says that if somebody's distracted, tarad b'malachtai, and he can't focus for a full Shmoneh Esrei, so he says Havinenu, which is the abbreviated Shmoneh Esrei. It's a shorter Shmoneh Esrei. The din in Shulchan Aruch. Says the Magen Avram, this din of the Shulchan Aruch is also when a person is running late, like the lashon of the Magen Avram, shahasha oiveres. For an example, he's wants to daven Shmoneh Esrei of Shachris, and it's just about the Seif Zman Tefillah, or even B'diavad, you don't have Schar Tefillah before Chatzos, it's before the Shkia, whatever time Seif Zman Mincha is, you do not, your Shmoneh Esrei takes 5 minutes, you do not have that full time. Says the Magen Avram, daven a shorter Shmoneh Esrei. Clear? You're not going to be able to finish the whole Shmoneh Esrei, so you don't have 5 minutes, you only have 2 minutes, so say the shorter Shmoneh Esrei. Says the Aruch HaShulchan, I'll pee this Tosfos. Tosfos is second teretz. What was Tosfos' second teretz? Tosfos' second teretz is that the Kollel would have been able to be utilized as long as you start. It would have been started in the Zman of Kas, of Zam, then you can continue. Says the Aruch HaShulchan right in Siman Kuf Yud, I argue on the Magen Avram and I hold, as long as you start Bizman Heter, Bizman, it's good. If you start Shmoneh Esrei before the Seif Zman Tefillah, you start Shmoneh Esrei before Shkia, before the Seif Zman, even though your whole Shmoneh Esrei is going to go overtime, it's fine. As I sagt the Aruch HaShulchan. Moira de get Clara din. What'd you say?
Once Hashem was in a, you start telling someone something when they're upset or angry, later they'll continue with that same thing. So maybe that's the part what basically saying. Who says for a Iyuv?
You want to be machalik. Let me take a look at the Aruch HaShulchan. Somebody says about Midah Taiva, then for sure you could accomplish. We'll get back a little bit to Yeshayel, I believe, at the end, because I want to end off with to Santa Claire, which could be we have to understand what is the gather of why you can continue. He says the Holchanachar Schala. So you're asking, maybe once he started the Kollel and it took traction because of the Zman Kas, so you could continue. But here it's a halacha din. That's the kasha. But the pashat pshat is that once a person started before the Shkia, and it was a time that he could daven, so once he started, he got his foot in the door to speak to the Rabbi Shalom Tim Espal. B'doime to the Kollel. This machloikis, the Magen Avram and the Aruch HaShulchan, is actually in another place as well. In Siman Kuf Chav Daled, when the Shulchan Aruch speaks about if the time is you're gonna miss the Zman. So the Magen Avram explains what does it mean missing the Zman. Says the Magen Avram, I'll read the lashon. Pirish lo yuchlu ligmoir kol yutches brochas toich zman atfilah. What does it mean missing the Zman? It means you're not going to be able to include the whole entire Shmoneh Esrei within the time. That's called missing the time. Right here, Zok the Aruch HaShulchan, no. Sheyaver Azman doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to say the whole Shmoneh Esrei within the time. Sheyaver Azman means you're not going to be able to start on time. So we have over here a clear machloikis ladina, the Magen Avram and the Aruch HaShulchan. Do you need to daven the whole tefillah b'zman, or it's enough as long as you started the tefillah, that's enough already. It's moiridik negeya. Moiridik negeya. Versteht sich als negeya. If you daven Shabbos morning, let's call it on the later end. Yeah, shul's at daven, let's say 9:30. Depending what time Scheiner is. If the Zman Tefillah, let's say, is about 10:27 or so, so is it that you have to start Shmoneh Esrei 9:26, or is it that you have to end by 9:27? Very negayah. This is mamash negayah kapshut halacha. It's always negayah. It's negayah for every time. Zman Tefillah, wherever there's a zman, is it enough to start, or you have to have the whole tefillah before? Interesting, this machlokes ladina, the Aruch HaShulchan of the Magen Avram, the Prima Godim is mesupek. He brings this din, and he says v'tzarachian. It's v'tzarachian. V'tzarachian, if it's enough to start, you have to have the whole tefillah. You may ask me a little bit of a different shaila, a little different. You may ask me that l'chayra, this din is only from the second teretz of Tosfos. Tosfos' first teretz doesn't say this yesod that you could start. Tosfos' first teretz is kalim. There's enough time with 1 second. So l'chayra, what the Aruch HaShulchan builds off Tosfos is only Tosfos' second teretz. Zok the Minchas Yitzchak, and he brings the Yaris Tavash. The Yaris Tavash asks questions on Tosfos' first teretz. Tosfos' first teretz says kalim. So the Yaris Tavash asks, kalim, who are we talking about? Which nation are we talking about that he would have said kalim? It's true, it's taka 1 second to say kalim, but kalim who? Memela, the Yaris Tavash has kashas, other questions on Tosfos. Memela, says the Minchas Yitzchak, we go more with Tosfos' second teretz, and being that Tosfos' second teretz says this yesod, that as long as you start, says the Aruch HaShulchan Ladin, as long as you start, it's enough. Just to expand a bit more on this machlokes ladina, the Magen Avram says you cannot rely on this of starting, and the Aruch HaShulchan says you could. Like the Tzad HaIsser, the Ben Ish Chai, in his Sefer Rav Pa'alim, he has a whole tshuva back and forth. Lamaisi, he concludes that one cannot start Shmoneh Esrei if he's not going to finish it on time. There's a couple of Mishnah Brewers that paskin like that, La Halacha also. Maybe I'll just read some of them inside the Lashon. In Hilchas Kriyash Ma'asimin Nun Ches Sif Katan Hey, says the Mishnah Berurah v'tzarich legamra kula bezmana. You have to finish the whole everything. In Simin Kuf Yudim Roya Shahazman Tfilo Iveres Im Yispal Larucha Mutter L'Tchatchilo L'Yispal Havinenu, meaning to say is that have the shorter Shmoneh Esrei. Weiter the Mishnah Berurah says v'tzarich ligmor hatfila Shmoneh Esrei b'toich shlish hayoim. Before the Seif Zman Tefillah to finish the whole Shmoneh Esrei. Ulechein tzarich kol adam lizoher lihispalol koidem shkiyas achama dafka. It's not a discussion here when the Zman Tefillah is and when you could daven mincha tol. But if you could daven mincha tol shkiyah, how the Mishnah Berurah goes, so he says, Dahainu sheyigmar tfilasai ba'oit sheyigmar tfilasai, to finish the whole davening before shkiyah. And one 5 different Mishnah Berurahs, sheyav perish la yuchal ligmar kol shmoyne esrei brachas toich zman tefillah. So we have over here a machlokes ladina. The Yida Kadosh Mepeshischa also brings the Tzad Heter. the tzad heter that you could, as long as you start, it's enough. I think it's the Minchas Yitzchak says, or no, the Eretz Tzvi says that it was brought b'Shem Tov al Shem Tov like that, the tzad heter. So we have a machlokes to point out that this machlokes ladina is not only relevant by davening. Not l'chayr, it's negeya also by other mitzvahs that are negeya to time. What's an example? He's saying achilas matzah. The hain if a person starts eating the matzah before chatzos. Good? Good? Interesting. Good. Berachas Hamazon, if a person starts benching right before the 72 minutes, it would be told if a person could start then benching, because the rest of the benching is after the Zman. Good. Very good. Another nafkamina or two that Taka the Beis can bring, but these are clear nafkaminas, clearly. The Beis can bring lagabe the Purim Suda. The Ramah says that a person should eat roiv sudasei bayom. It's pretty common practice that people start the Purim Suda right before Shkia. Really, the Ramah says roiv sudasei because it's the mitzvah Sudas Purim is by day. But if it's enough just to start, so the poskim say, as long as you start, it's enough.
This is different. He's saying that roiv has to be done like that. He's not saying that you have to start.
Lefi this halacha, you want to know from the Ramah, is it a raya neged what we're saying? If as long as you start, it's enough. If you wash, you make hamoitzi and you eat not a kazayas challah, you start, you eat a drop of challah, that would be enough.
Let's say by davening, by zman too. We don't say that you have to finish by hand. Let's say roiv before Shkia. That was the case how a lot of young people would be in trouble. We're saying that you have to start.
Correct. The Aruch HaShulchan holds like that. The Magen says you have to have the whole, yeah.
We're saying but the Aruch HaShulchan doesn't say roiv Purim Suda.
I didn't check with the Aruch HaShulchan lagabe the Purim Suda. Could be he speaks about it also. It's Kedai Taka to check. But clearly a nafkamina would be by that also if you could just wash the Purim Suda. Another nafkamina that's brought in the Poskim is Kiddush Lavana. This is also negeya. You see the cloud, you're waiting for 5-6 minutes, and then it opens up, and you see the next cloud coming, and you know that it's not going to, by the time you finish the bracha, it's going to be covered. Would also be a nafkamina. Is it enough just to start, or the whole bracha has to be while the Lavana, you see the Lavana? The Machzis HaShekel brings yet another case that connects to this meduber. I'm not going to go through the whole discussion, but he speaks about saying Tehillim before davening, but then he says that if maybe there's a mile to say after davening. Why? Because if you daven b'tzibur, the tefillah b'tzibur extends even to the Tehillim that you say afterwards. You'll see the Machzis HaShekel. But it's vital with this Yesoid. It started b'tzibur. It continues afterwards also. So we have a machlokes ladina. Could you rely on just the beginning, or the whole mitzvah, the whole tefillah has to be bizman heter? I do want to point out that even lefi the tzad ha'oisrim call it, there's yet another tzad only by davening. We just said now that it's not only negeya tefillah, it's negeya mitzvahs also. Benching could be actually yet tefillah, achilas matzah, purim suda, mitzvahs. The Eishel Avram of B'chuch, that Eishel Avram, he brings and he says like this, that it could be by davening you could rely on this heter. Why could you rely on this heter? The Aruch HaShulchan says al pi Tosfos because you started beheter. He says no. The reason why you could start, and even though the remainder is going to be afterwards, is because it's also considered the Zman. Why is it considered the Zman? If you could only daven mincha till Shkia with what is it the Zman afterwards? The teretz is it's at least the Zman Tashlumen. It's considered somewhat of a Zman. Zman Tashlumen. Avada, you could only have tashlumin if you were oinus. You can't stamazay daven, but it's enough considered the zman that if you start mincha before the shkia, you could continue later on also. That would be a svara, not al pi taisvis of this week's parsha, but it would also only be for davening. It wouldn't be negeya not for matzah. L'cha'ira, it also wouldn't be negeya for benching, which is tefillah, because there's no, after 72 minutes, it's finished. But davening, where there is tashlum and it's considered a zman, you could, as long as you start b'zman heter, it's good.
What about by chakras? You don't have the window. By chakras, you don't have you can't do tashlum right after zman shach. You have to wait till zman. Right?
So Lamais is like this. Lagabe Shachris, you're asking very good. You're asking by Shachris, where would it be Negeya to have the Tashlumen that you can continue? So here's the thing like this. I hear what you're asking. Let's break it down. If you're davening by Soif Zman Tefillah, so you're allowed to daven afterwards. You don't have Schar Tefillah. Where it would be more Negeya is if a person is davening after the Zman Tefillah. By Chatzos. And after Chatzos, you can't daven. So could he start right before Chatzos and then afterwards is Zman Tashlumen?
No, because you have to wait till mincha after a half hour later.
Good.
To make your Sheiner, it take a really long time.
No, you're asking that you could only daven mincha half hour later. I'm not recalling exactly right now, but if I remember correctly, it could even be that b'di'evid, to look it up again, I'm not saying, I'm kamat zicher that even b'di'evid, really b'di'evid, you could already daven from after Chatzos Mincha. There's a few Mishnah about it. Then it would write to be this Zman Tashlumen.
But it's only else, Mishnah to install because
right.
The walls weren't straight, so they couldn't know exactly what.
And that's why they gave an extra half hour. But if that half hour you cannot daven mincha, so then it would be taka interesting shaylam. It's not as Zman Tashlumen yet. I think because b'di'evid you could. It's true taka you can't because it's a suffix. But if lamaisa today, if a person davens mincha after chatzos, he has to daven over. I don't know if you could use this svar of tashlumen. I think lamaisa, if a person b'di'evid, the only time you could daven mincha is after chatzos before the half hour. I think b'di'evid is yotze. So memelis is Zman Tashlumen taka.
It's just that we don't know.
Good. So that's where we wait. Yeah.
It's mivanashach. If it's not chatzos yet, then you still haven't.
Shachris, very good, very good, very good. Lamaisa, to bring it all together, we have over here a very important machloikis, the Mogen Avram and the Aruch HaShulchan Ladina. I'm definitely not going to be machriya. These are machloikis, gedolei hapoiskim, what to do. The Minchas Yitzchak in the Tshuva says that you can rely on the Aruch HaShulchan. I don't think he brings the Aruch HaShulchan, but you can rely on the Tzad Heter b'shas adchak. The same also in Eretz Tzvi, the Kozhik lover. He was Rosh Hashiva in Chachma Lablin after Meir Shapiro. My grandfather learned by him. He has also a long tshuva about this. He goes in, he really speaks be'ikr about the Sudas Purim that people start mamash right before night. And he says that b'shas adchak, not that you should do it chatchila, b'shas adchak, you can rely on it. I want to conclude with a shaila for the olam. After we have this all put together, I want to ask the olam a shaila. I didn't see anybody speak about it. Adrab, if somebody finds a maramakam, but this is a nice shaila, I think. These are halacha that a person, it's machlokes in the Gemara, it's a machlokes, we paskin the Ovid Kamara of it, the Ovid Kamara of it, meaning, if a person wants to daven mincha before plag and ma'ariv after plag, before shkia, when it's still day, you could. Yeah, we know about it. Yeah. Klar, it's kapaskin the Shulchan Aruch. We gave over here a few shurim about it. You can't obviously do tarta de sasri and daven mincha after plag and ma'ariv before shkia. That's tarta de sasri. The question is it every day of your life, the same day? But al kaparim you can't do tarta de sasri. That's pretty clear. Maybe Friday night is a different shmooze. People that daven tonight will make an early Shabbos and daven mincha after the plag of Meir before Shkia. There's more what to be makel. That's not the discussion. But Al Kaponim, a regular Wednesday, you're davening mincha before the plag. You want to make sure daven before the plag, so you can daven Meir after the plag. Let me see you're running late, and you want to daven, and it's mamash a minute to plag. Could you start davening mincha a minute before the plag? Your whole Shemoneh Esrei is going to be after the plag, and then still daven Meir before Shkia. Is it hard to desasri or not? And I'll explain. Avada, you could daven mincha after the plag also. That's shitas chachamim. But you don't want to do a tar to the sasri. Meaning to say is, it's not a question about starting beheter bezman. I could hear that even if you paskin like the Aruch HaShulchan that says as long as you start bezman, it's enough. But when it comes to the plag, tar to the sasri, it's very nice. You started a minute before the plag. But at the end of the day, you davened after the plag. There's nothing wrong. It's beautiful, it's moiridik, but you davened after the plag. If you davened after the plag, then l'cha'ira, there's what to think about, and maybe you can't have a ma'ariv till after the shkia, because it will be tired to the sasri. Meaning to say is, the plag might not include all the shilas we spoke about. But what's the suffix? The tzad may be that yes, and this circles back to the shaila you asked in the beginning, what you brought up, this is what I meant. It could be together what we see from the Tosfos of as long as you start the Kollel and the time. What's the vart? Once you start, so then you can even go over time, or the pshat is everything over the time, after the time, all is attached back to the bizman. When a person starts Shemoneh Esrei before Chatzos, and it goes to after the Chatzos. So what's the pshat? Is the pshat, once I started before Chatzos, I could get away with after Chatzos. Yes. Or is the pshat a second, or is the pshat that even the after Chatzos, we look at it like before Chatzos. If that's the vart.
Yes, by Laksneris Erev Shabbos, Yisha Mishum Chitza. Yes, it says, if the Yisha Mishum Chitza, it's like I'm lighting on Shabbos. It says that the Yisha Mishum means that everything is
from the beginning. Very good from the beginning. So Memel over here, as long as you started in the Zman, the whole rest of the Tefillah gets pulled in within the Zman. Maybe that's the pshat. If that would be the pshat, then that would be l'chayr the same thing by even if you start, as long as you started before the plag, even what you davened after the plag, that gets pulled back to what you started before the plag, and then Memel you could still daven Ma'ariv, and you would be able to start. If you start, chatchila not, but if you started the plag minyan a minute, Shemoneh Esrei, a minute before the plag, you'll be able to, right after mincha, continue with Ma'ariv. Have a wonderful Shabbos.